So we are going to go over the Bryan Kohberger hearing that took place this past Friday, which was the 26th of January, 2024. It happened a little after 1 p.m. Pacific time over there. And this was just the public one. Before this, they had a sealed hearing where they discussed the interlocutory appeal and the motion to reconsider the dismissal of the grand jury indictment. Well, it was interesting. It was like almost an hour long. Judge streamed it and didn't allow it to be saved. It just deleted off the channel.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I watched Get a Clue after. I didn't get to watch it live, unfortunately, but I watched his streaming of it after, and it just literally, it wasn't even the end of the hearing yet, and it just said this video's private, and he couldn't even finish it.
They were probably blocking certain people that were streaming it, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know what happened, but there are now, like East Idaho News, Law and Crime has the full length uploaded now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can go back and see it, but I wanted to review it and discuss some of the things specifically Ann Taylor said, because I was like, whoa, that's kind of a bombshell. Like,
yeah.
So
I want to know. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
So,
because of, travel stuff.
Yeah, everything you've been through this week. So it begins with Jay Logston making the first argument, basically saying they're never going to get answers on their argument around all of this grand jury indictment dismissal. Their argument that the standard of proof should have been without a reasonable doubt, or beyond a reasonable doubt, as opposed to what the current working law is, which is probable cause for a grand jury indictment. And that after trial, it never happens where you can go back to how an indictment was gotten, was put through or whatever. You can't go backwards. You can't go back to that indictment and say there was a problem here and get an appeal on those grounds. That almost never happens. You have to look at the trial, and you're worrying about the sentencing and all of these other things. So basically, if we don't get an answer now, we're never going to get it.
Okay.
And the state responds and said, it has been consistently probable cause this entire time. It is the working law. And appealing this doesn't advance the litigation. It doesn't advance us with getting through the trial and getting to the end goal. And that this is going to just create a circle where they're going to have to restart everything. And yeah, that's what Ann Taylor wants. She does want to go in a circle and restart it by having a preliminary hearing.
I think that's the obvious goal.
That is her obvious goal. His defense team's obvious goal.
Yeah.
And it also says that the state also says that Idaho Rule 13F says that the whole proceeding is stayed, like this entire, thing, Bryan's proceedings will be stayed until the termination of that appeal. Well, yeah. And that's what they don't want. So what I'm seeing here is the judge in the state do not want any more delays. They want to go to trial in this year of summer. The defense does not. So the judge and the state, this entire court hearing, are pushing for that summer 2024 trial. And why I would love to see it,
I don't think it's going to happen.
It is, I don't know. I really hope it doesn't happen based off of Ann Taylor's comments. So while I would love to see it because I want answers and I want all of us to have answers, I think it is in Bryan's best interest and the victim's best interest that it waits till 2025 for real, true, proper justice. I think in the interest of justice for everyone, it needs to be 2025. But anyway, we'll get into that more. So He also makes a statement, which I don't know. It's Thompson's little sidekick. I don't remember his name, but he says that the families also have a constitutional right to getting a timely resolution in this case. So that's another thing the state really focused on was the family's rights, which is funny because the state sucks at communicating with the family and have not cared what the family have wanted this entire time. They tore down the house, acting like, yes, we're going to respect the families, and then tore it down anyway after telling them they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And with very little notice. They never give them notice on anything. So they seem to only care about what the Chapins want because the Chapins just agree with the prosecution on everything. Which is, so
interesting.
You don't actually care what anyone wants.
Yeah.
Jay then says it's worth getting this, getting glanced at so that it doesn't just get tucked away and forgotten. He feels like it's important. And he's like, who are we kidding? This case isn't going to go away. He's like, even if you get a conviction, it's going to be in appeals for 28 years. So it's not coming any quicker. This is going to last forever. It's going to be going on for decades.
Yeah.
So what is the hurry, essentially? And he said, get some stuff wrong and see how long it takes then. We need to do this right. Because if we do it wrong, it's going to take even longer.
Yeah.
And then he says, whether or not it makes it to trial or not is only part of what the court needs to look at, particularly where the state wants to kill someone. Straight up said that in the court. Rough.
Yeah. Wow.
He said the state wants to kill someone. And then he sat down. And then the judge he ignored that. He didn't even address it. And he said that, basically probable cause in a grand jury indictment is rooted in established law. And he's confident in his decision. He doesn't feel like he did anything wrong with that decision. He said there's no difference in opinion among the state, which is one of the standards to get this argument to the Supreme Court, that there would need to be lots of issues with it, lots of people with a difference of opinion. And it's just in this case. He doesn't want delays anymore. He's concerned about that. He said the Supreme Court could still take this up and overturn it, but they're going to take the district judge's opinion into account and his rulings into account if they decide to do that. Or even, so basically the Supreme Court's not going to consider it, most likely, if he didn't consider it. He's asked what is this going to help? It's not going to advance the litigation. And he denies it and is like, let's set a trial date. So then Thompson gets up and addresses Jay Logston and says it was offensive. What he said was offensive. And they're just enforcing the law that their legislators put in place in cases like this, with facts like this. A jury's entitled to decide not only guilt, but potential fulfillment. And they're only trying to fulfill their responsibilities under the law. He said characterizing it like that appeals to raw emotion, and it has no place in this court, and asked for it not to be allowed anymore. And you know what? The judge never addresses it one time.
Look, it's because it's not subjective. That is actually an objective statement.
You're right.
That the outcome would be killing somebody. Now, clearly, look, I haven't seen it, which I actually think is beneficial in this video that you're watching, because the only way that I would assume that it was a mic drop, like you're saying it was a mic drop, is if the tone suggested it was a mic drop. It would have to have been presented with a certain tone to make it sound like where they kill someone, otherwise that is the end goal in a death penalty case. So technically, it shouldn't be offensive because that statement is true. Death penalty case, goal is to kill somebody, and that is their accountability around committing a heinous act if they're found guilty of said heinous act. So in my opinion, the subjective statement is from Thompson, but I also haven't seen it.
Yeah. So what I think the judge was thinking is like, dang, Logston, that was a bit harsh, but whatever, it's true. And then he listens to Thompson and he was like, it's like, it's whatever. Like, it was true, even if it was a bit harsh. Because Thompson literally is requesting, that has no place in this courtroom. I don't want to see it any further. Please make sure it doesn't happen anymore. And the judge does nothing about it at all. He doesn't even mention it.
I think that's a fair manage of the situation, because look, you're asking someone not to say something that's true. That sounds really problematic, in my opinion.
Well, I think Santa is pretty problematic. Mr. Santa. Okay. So he said, he brings up the victims and the families again, talking about they have a right to this being timely. He said, but this case is super serious and complicated, and there needs to be a lot of effort put into doing it correctly. And they want to move forward. They want to be productive. They want to set a trial date, and they believe it should be done this summer for all those reasons we saw in the order, which is that the summer is the best time because the university isn't in session, and they need hotel rooms for witnesses and things like that have to be in town. And during the school year, there's lots of events where hotels get completely booked up in Moscow because it's a small town, and they don't want to deal with that complicated situation of needing to get a hotel room for a witness and not being able to, and interfering with school kids,
I wonder, right? And I don't know, but I wonder, since we're all of a sudden seeing the prosecution want to like hurry things up, that must be, or could be, due to the fact that they weren't expecting Ann Taylor to use her investigative team.
They want her to stop. They want deadlines.
When the whole time they've been dragging their heels very clearly. I know they've said the opposite, but come on, this is a court. They were dragging their heels the entire time, slowing everything down, trying to get him to waive his speedy trial in a very manipulative way. And me personally, I have no idea if he's innocent. I have no idea if he's guilty. But what I do know is that not turning over evidence and intentionally slowing down the defense from creating a proper defense, it breaches somebody's rights as a person.
Okay. So we haven't went through Ann Taylor's comments yet. And I know I'm saying this a little premature because we haven't gone through her comments yet, but absolutely. And I want to say one thing. Ann Taylor, which we're going to go through here in a second, she has not received the cast report. She has not received many expert reports, and she keeps discovering things that she doesn't have. As she digs through the discovery, she's like, I don't have that expert's report. I don't have that report. I don't have anything confirming this is true, and this is what happened. The state digs through the discovery exactly like the defense should be doing. Both of them should be doing the same thing, digging through the discovery, making sure everything's there. And then she's changed tactics. Clearly, it's not the state's fault now that I don't have this. I'm not blaming it on anyone. The state is dealing with all of this too. They're going through the same thing we are. No, I don't agree. I think she's just being nice to not offend Bill Thompson, and she's trying to be on his good side so that she can get all of those things, is what I think's going on. That's just my personal opinion. But it feels like they're intentionally not giving those things because it's been a year.
I've said this.
They should have
the cast report.
Apparently they have a draft of it, but not the official one, which is interesting.
There isn't one.
We'll see. But she only has a draft. She doesn't have an official cast report.
That is the official.
She said also that there's tons of things that she needs about the work they did with the cell towers that she does not have.
It's because they didn't do any. I've said it from the beginning that it's impossible. Everything that was said in Brett Payne's exhibit is impossible. It's not possible. So it's not going to be there. It will not. And I read on here, what a cast report is. There are multiple steps. First, you have to get all the information from the cell companies, all of it, every bit of information. Then you have to draft everything for potentials. Then you have to go out there and quadrillion check your work to make sure that in real life, IRL, you have to be in Moscow with your phone, checking the cell tower strength and everything with your paperwork, making sure that what you figured out on the paper is happening in real life while taking pictures to verify proof and reconfirming it. That is a cast report. It cannot be done just through, hey, let me get what towers this phone number was connected to at this time. No, it has to be quadruple checked over and over and over in real life and on technology.
That's a good point, but I don't understand the full picture yet. So I do feel like the prosecution was dragging their heels and not turning over discovery intentionally in the beginning to get Bryan to waive his speedy trial right. But now we're seeing the tables turning where the defense is dragging their heels, and Taylor's very clearly, as I'm about to tell you, she's like, I need time. I am not getting discovery I need, and I do not have a time to go through all of this. And it sounds, I mean, anyway. And now we see the prosecution, who was dragging their heels, speeding up and like, we need to have a trial immediately.
Which is why it's so manipulative, dude. Someone's either guilty or they're not. And if you have enough evidence to prove their guilt, why do you need to manipulate and try and make it to where they can't create a proper defense like that? It doesn't make sense.
Well, that's kind of what I'm wondering. So them delaying the speedy trial made it so that Anne could dig through all of this stuff. And now they're trying to speed it up. Why?
So she can't dig through it.
Yeah, but does that mean they needed something they didn't have in the beginning, and they were delaying it so that they could have something they didn't have, and now their case is as strong as it's ever gonna get, and they're worried if she continues digging, it's gonna be like a house of cards and fall apart?
Maybe.
Like,
I don't know.
I'm just throwing it out there because I don't understand. What is the point of the prosecution delaying it and allowing her to have that time to dig through it? What did they need? Why did they need to delay it?
The prosecution? Because they needed the school to go through their spring whatever rate. What's it called? Where you sign up for college. Their spring signups.
Yeah, but they went a whole year.
What do you mean they went a whole year?
I mean, he waived a speedy trial in August.
Yeah.
Of 2023.
Yeah. That gets through another year.
You think it all had to do with the school?
I think that was a very big part of it. Absolutely. Look, it's no maybe, and that's not me tin hatting, okay? Police is involved in politics. That includes local politics. We looked at it in the Baltimore. We see it even in healthy police stations where our politicians come down on police and say, look, I am trying to get reelected. These metrics don't look good. You better tighten them up. You know what I mean? And police do that. And if we're thinking that this isn't going on in Moscow, you are seriously mistaken, dude, that Scott Green is not coming to the police and being like, look, my registration numbers are hurting.
Or to the prosecutor.
I cannot have a madman out and we have no idea who it is. And my most important semester signups are coming up and you guys haven't figured out who it is. That's the first year. The second year, we're still pushing to the speedy trial. And again, you're back to the next year of signups and they can't risk there being any doubt. So they're playing by school year, dude. That's what's going on. They're playing by school year.
So anyway, moving on to what Anne said, that she feels like this is not going to be a 6-week trial. It's going to be a 12 to 15 week trial. And this is when they're talking about obviously scheduling the trial. She said, as an attorney, his whole team needs to be able to look at every single aspect of this case. They need to dig through every piece of discovery and meet with their client regularly. And she's like, we're doing all of that. Meeting with experts, hiring a mitigator, and they've already done all of that. She said, it takes a long time to get all of this done. Then she goes into the 51 terabytes, and she said, I want to explain to you exactly how much data that is. And she said that Masseth was looking at their Dropbox, and she said 1 terabyte holds 250,000 pics or 500 hours of HD video or 6.5 million documents. And she said, we have 51 of those. That's only 1 terabyte. And we have 51 of those. And she said, it's a lot. Another aspect.
She's over exaggerating a little bit, but that's fine. All lawyers do.
Yeah. It's still a lot. Like, no, a terabyte is a lot.
It's a lot.
And she said that the media has drawn so much attention to this case that it's not ending anytime soon, and that it affects the witnesses. She's like, they're slamming the doors in our face. They don't want anything to do with us. She said, or you have a witness who's talked way too much to the media and now we can't use them anymore. And she said in the innocence phase that there's usually at least like 400 potential witnesses. She said they have 100 left to talk to. And that's like what they have talked to is only 10% of that. Of like the 400 that's expected, it's only 10% of what they should have talked to so far. And they have 100 left.
Jeez.
She was talking about like a standard number, what's standard, and then saying we have 100 left and we've only talked to like 10% of what we should have so far. She said they also need to go through Bryan's entire life story, go 3 generations back on his mother's and his father's side. That's part of like the standards of what she should be doing as a lawyer in his case. And she was going through, I don't remember what it's called, but it's some kind of like rules, standards, policy, procedures, which is interesting. I didn't know they needed to go 3 generations back on his mother and his father's side.
It's probably a death penalty thing.
Yeah. And then she talks about the 11th request for discovery. She said that it includes like 250 items with subparts. She said we're getting in all this information. She talks about like 13,000 photos, 9,000 tips that couldn't be gotten until that tip line was shut down. And she said none of this stuff is indexed at all. It's just raw and jumbled up and getting thrown at us.
Of course.
And of course it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a common tactic. I've said
they're burying them in data.
But I want to be very clear here that this is a common tactic for civil court. This is not a common tactic for death penalty, a death penalty capital case. Capital case. Yes, capital case. We're seeing civil court tactics by the prosecution. I absolutely believe the prosecution in order to control this case to go 100% in the direction they want, they have done the character assassination. They'll never be able to admit it. And I'll never have evidence of that. Be very clear about that. I will never have evidence of that. Just like every other case that has been controlled by media, you'll never get evidence of that, okay? Who do you think these people are calling in, claiming to have connections, but not willing to give name, not willing to give information, and then the mainstream media runs with it? Come on. They come from somewhere. You know what I mean?
True.
So
she said numerous times, no blame on the state. They're dealing with the same thing. They're getting the same thing. They're just relaying it to us. And then she goes into she uses this as an example that they have a very important video that is vital to this case, but they only have part of it, that they can't get the rest. It's in fragments. And she said, we need it. It is vital for us to review the entirety of that footage. And apparently it's very long. It's like a very long piece of footage, and they've only been giving fragments.
That means it's a security camera or a...
They don't even have an estimated date on when they will get the entirety of that video.
I mean, but my question is why? Like, I'm confused. I would need to understand the background of why. So they're saying that with the 11th request for discovery, the prosecution themselves have this video and they have only sent pieces of it. That means that they would have had to cut it.
She's saying she has put no blame on the state.
I'm not talking about blame. Who cares? Like, and I don't mean that for what you're saying. What I'm trying to say in general is blame is pointless. It means nothing. Like, who's telling the truth and who's blaming, that's absolutely meaningless. So what is the assumption? Who has control of this video and who is sending it to the defense? So because whoever has control of it, regardless of blame, it's not important, is the one cutting this video up then.
So throughout her statement, she mentions numerous times that they're dealing with many law enforcement agencies and that they are sending it to it's hard to get it because of all these different agencies, and that they're sending it to the prosecution and then the prosecution is relaying it to them as fast as they can. And it sounds like she's blaming it on the agencies, not the state, that they're waiting for it from the agencies, not the prosecutor, that he is giving them everything he has, which is another tactic.
You know what, though?
It's another tactic because he doesn't have it.
So
he can't give it to them and he may not know about it. And it's plausible deniability, which is what I think is going on here.
Or it's like I've said from the beginning, and it's probably a story that we need to do again, is talking about how prosecutors handle and or manage when they've realized that they're covering a case that involves corruption or some kind of police fraud. Look, I'm all for giving people the benefit of the doubt. I am 100%. All right. So did Ann Taylor meet with Bill Thompson, and Bill Thompson could have been like, look, I'm going to be clear with you what I think is going on here between me and you, and I'm worried about my career. I'm worried how the image is going to cast on me, whatever. I mean, we don't know these things. Lawyers talk. They talk. And that's okay as long as they're not like sharing
jeopardizing the
information or jeopardizing the case. But Bill Thompson could totally go to Ann Taylor and say, look, I don't want my career to look bad, because everyone's attacking Bill Thompson. We've even brought up questions around him. You know what I mean? So is it a situation where there's something funky going on and Bill Thompson is like, putting up his walls to protect himself because there's something funky going on? Maybe
that's why she started saying no blame on the state. Like she kept saying that and talking about all the agencies they have to get this stuff from.
Of course.
Which is interesting that they only were given parts of a full-length video, and it's vital that it's so important. I saw some people speculating it was the Linda Lane footage. That I don't think that's it.
It's not the Linda Lane footage.
I do not think that's it.
It's not the Linda Lane footage.
No way.
Dude, people...
No way is it the Linda Lane footage.
From the beginning, people have been so obsessed with the Linda Lane footage. You guys, and look, we aren't the end all be all, but have you ever seen us cover the Linda Lane footage? No, not once. There's nothing there. No, nothing.
There isn't.
Nothing.
There isn't.
In the whole footage, there is nothing.
Well, you know that Jesse Weber just covered the Linda Lane footage?
Yeah, we talked about it last week a little bit. About him talking about the speculation, and you hear a thud not taking into account or explaining to people, do you understand how many apartments are around that? How many cars are around
that? How many dogs?
That could be like neighbors next door, bumping, like doing their thing. It could be anything, dude.
It could.
Anything.
It could be anything. And, Get a Clue actually brought up recently that the Gonzalez family, which I had never seen this, said that Murphy was not a dog that barked. He wasn't a barking dog, which I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means he didn't have the capability to bark, like something was wrong with him, or if that means that it took a lot to get him to bark. Like he just didn't bark very often. So, I mean, which is super interesting considering everyone's constantly listening for a dog bark. There's probably tons of dogs in that area.
Yeah.
But then she brings up the alibi that because of all these issues and not being able to interview witnesses and everything, that they haven't been able to complete their alibi. They haven't been able to finish it, and that they need a new date on it, and that the state can't say that their time is expired. That she
what was the response to that? Did Bill say anything?
No.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, there's something there. Bill's putting up safety barriers if he didn't come at her for that.
Well, I don't have notes on what Bill said, so I'm going off on memory, but hold on. We'll get to that in a second. So she says, in fear, I will tell you I could be ready by summer 2025. But I'm saying that being afraid that I'm not going to be ready. And she said, because that's in a perfect world. She's like, if you can get me the discovery deadlines and I can get all this stuff so I have the time to go through all of it, because Bryan is our number one priority. His case is our priority. All of us are constantly working on this every single day. All of us. And we are willing to do that. And we want to continue doing that. And he has the right to effective counsel. And we are supposed to dig through every inch of this case, every inch of the discovery. And that's his right. And I thought that statement was wonderful. But he said, this is the big bombshell for me. She said, they need to have a clear picture of the path of how the state got to Bryan Kohberger.
Uh-oh.
She said, I've read that PCA over and over and over. She said, I know the different pieces, but I don't know how they fit together. And she said, the more work I do, the less I know about how they fit together.
You said that from the beginning.
I was like, I feel like I'm hearing myself right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm hearing what you guys say. That is reverberating throughout the true crime community. Is the more I look into this, the less it makes sense. We all feel that way. And to know that Ann Taylor, who is digging through every inch of this case, feels that way. Whoa.
Yeah. How did they get there?
She has way more information than we have, you guys. Like, she is digging through that discovery.
Does she? Because I'll tell you. So that discovery, I've said it from the beginning. That discovery does not look. I'm just guesstimating here, but I'm guesstimating over 90% of that 51 terabytes doesn't have anything to do with Bryan Kohberger. Over 51%. Over 90% of that 51 terabytes doesn't have anything to do with Bryan Kohberger.
I bet you're right.
So the reason why she highlights the PCA there is because of the statements we've made multiple times over and over and over. So you can essentially minimize this case down to a few elements, right? Those few elements are the time of the crime or time of death. That is the cell phone information backing the location of him being there during that time and times leading up to it to prove, stalking, whatever. It is the car, the supposed car, and it is the route of travel. That's essentially, or the DNA. That's what I was missing. That's essentially the major evidence they have there, and everything else, you've got to be able to prove this. So I think what she's talking about when she mentions the PCA is that she's taking these major pieces that are connecting him as the key suspect in this and verifying every single piece of this from, the start of it backwards. experts, right? So if you're talking about the car footage, okay, fine. Let's start pulling every video camera. Let's start talking to people locally. Let's start getting any witnesses of where that car was at what times, because maybe Bryan wasn't paying attention if he's innocent and was just aimlessly driving, has no concept of time, no concept of wherever he was. That could be me, someone like me. If I was out driving, I don't know if I'd be able to tell you exactly where it went if I was just driving aimlessly, you know. But you would have to pull all that from the PCA, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting. That it's super, super interesting. And it makes me nervous for the case, because we've said it a million times. We're not trying to prove Bryan's innocent. If anything, we want him to be guilty, because the implications of him not being guilty are terrifying. But then Bill responds, okay? And he's like, everything she said is true. She's absolutely right that this is a complicated case, that we're not getting the discovery in time. Like, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot, you know, and that he, you know, basically wants them to be afforded the opportunity to like bring these things up and, you know, everything. He didn't really argue against her.
No way. I'm telling you.
He was
putting up the safety walls.
He was super nice.
He's putting up the safety walls. Something's up.
Something's
wrong.
Anne and Bill were way too nice to each other. Logston was the one who was not nice, but I don't even think he was trying to not be nice. I think Bill just got offended by that comment.
Yeah, he was grandstanding. That's what it was. It sounds like it was just grandstanding, you know, trying to land an emotional point to prove an argument that you're giving. But
yeah, I agree. But he like really didn't argue anything at all. Like, that's why I don't even have notes on it, because I'm like, he just agreed with her. That's all he did. He was just nice. And the judge basically says that he doesn't want any more delay. He has to think about it. He said, I got to think about this. I can't make a ruling on the scheduling. But he doesn't want it to go to 2025.
So, I mean, oh gosh, that's a problem. I mean, look, Judge has the right to make the ruling. It is 100% in his ball court, but he is
his ball court.
The ball is in his court. If he makes the ruling for 2024, he is going to have so much hate, bro, because if an attorney, which an attorney has to act in good faith, is telling you that because we're going full trial and I do not have the time to offer proper counsel, if you put it in 2024, I mean, his ruling and saying that it's going to come in 2024 is essentially saying, I don't care about you as a citizen.
Yeah, I don't care about your right to effective counsel.
Yeah. So that's a big decision for Judge to make, because it's going to be on his shoulders. Like, all of it, not Bill Thompson. Bill Thompson literally said, here, Judge, take all accountability.
Yeah.
It's on you.
Yeah, he did.
Good luck, bro.
He just said, if we're going to wait until 2025, we still ask it to be in the summertime because of the school and getting hotels for witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
That's all he asked. I found that interesting because, you know, Nancy Grace has said one thing and one thing only that I found super, super, super true. And that was that all that prosecutors and defense attorneys know is that if the other side wants it, you don't.
Yeah.
And it is a bit weird. Everybody's been pointing out, like, they agree on a lot of weird things. Why are they agreeing on those? Like the house being torn down.
Yeah, because I don't think the house being torn down would add any worth to either side. I really don't. I don't think it matters. I think Anne is trying to prove that Bryan Kohberger was never there, so the house doesn't add any worth to her.
I understand why the defense doesn't want it there.
I think that the prosecution gathered everything they can and simultaneously has a major issue with the case. And look, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you think he's guilty or innocent. There is not a single person out there that can say there's not problems here. When you read that PCA after understanding how gathering all that evidence works, right? You look at one piece, look at the cell phone evidence. All right. Do a deep dive into that and then come back to me. Like, there's problems here. And that house being torn down helps save the case from seeing any more problems, you know?
Yeah.
So.
But that's basically it. I wanted to go over all of it because I felt like there was some definite mic drops and bombshells in there. Like, it's funny because every little thing that like is actually relevant feels like such a big deal because we're given nothing. We're not given any new information. But I feel like she confirmed a lot, though, that we see as the public and aren't allowed to see. She confirmed in that statement.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like it was interesting. I don't know how I feel about the judge denying the appeal. I feel a lot of people I've noticed feel like it was pointless. I think that Ann Taylor should have argued the grand jury indictment in this case was improper or something. I don't know how it works. I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like she should have argued that grand juries are like unconstitutional. I don't know, because I feel like grand juries are wrong.
They are wrong. They're so wrong.
They're so wrong. I feel like there could have been a better way to argue it, to try to get grand juries nullified. But, and you know, I keep seeing people say, well, that would mean they have to go back to every other case and change it with the probable cause thing, though. And I'm thinking they don't have to do that. They can have a special working order saying any previous case isn't affected by this.
Yeah. Yep.
Only here, you know, herefore from now, it is affected. You know, at the start of this law being put in place or this case or whatever. Like, they can have special things that they add. I just, I don't know. I don't feel like that their argument is going anywhere with what the public is saying. Now, we don't know what they're arguing in the closed hearings. I wish we knew that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I really wish we knew it was in the closed hearings, because then maybe it would change a lot of minds. But we don't. But let me know what you guys think. Again, I don't know how I feel about the appeal or the judge's decision. I just don't know. That's something I'm going to have to think about. And then maybe we can talk about it in a live. But I definitely want to hear your opinions, what you thought about this hearing, if you felt like I did and that there were mic drops in here. But yeah.
Right.
Now, I did want to mention real quick that the Gonzalez family really wanted a date for the trial in an interview, and I'm going to be talking about their for my next case, their interview on Good Morning America and some of the information they dropped. So just stay tuned, and I'm going to talk about that here in a minute.